Let me tell you something real, something grown, folks, real, something life. Real, there comes a moment in a man's life when the thing he never paid attention to suddenly becomes the loudest voice in the room. And that thing is silence. See, a man can get used to a lot of noise, the noise of routine, the noise of comfort, the noise of knowing somebody out there cares enough to reach out, to check on him, to give him that little spark of validation, affection, or connection he never admits he needs. Men don't say it out loud, but they depend on it. They feed off it. They get comfortable in it. They get spoiled by it. But when you stop reaching out, when your name stops showing up on his phone, when your concern goes quiet, when your energy pulls back, something shifts inside him. Not immediately, because pride always sits in the front seat of a man's life at first. But silence is like a back seat driver. It doesn't shout. It doesn't whine. It doesn't complain. It just sits there, tapping him on the shoulder, making him look at himself in ways he never had to before. And that moment, that quiet awakening, is where this entire journey begins. Today, we're going to walk through 7 powerful transformations a man goes through when you stop reaching out. 7 deep chapters of truth. 7 emotional turning points. 7 inner shifts he cannot escape. 7 realizations he never expected. 7 moments that change him. Not as a list, not as bullet points, but as a smooth, emotional, Steve Harvey style journey about belief, struggle, courage, mindset, growth, and self-reflection. So buckle up, because we're about to step inside the mind of a man when the silence gets louder than the presence ever did. When silence makes a man face himself, silence is not just the absence of sound, it is the presence of truth. And when you stop reaching out to a man, the very first thing that happens inside him is not anger, not confusion, not frustration, but self-confrontation. That moment when he is finally forced to sit alone with the version of himself he has been avoiding for a long time. Because as long as you were reaching out, he never had to look too closely. Your effort covered his lack of effort. Your consistency covered his inconsistency. Your messages covered his emotional laziness. Your presence covered his absence. But the moment you stop reaching out, the moment your voice goes quiet, the moment your energy withdraws, that mask he was wearing begins to crack. And a man cannot run from the silence because silence travels with him. It sits in his car, in his room, in his head. Silence is the one truth he can't block, can't ignore, and can't argue with. At first, he tries to brush it off. He tells himself, you must be busy. He tells himself you're just giving him space. He pretends he doesn't notice the shift. That's what pride does. It protects him from the truth, at least temporarily. But pride has a short battery life, and silence has unlimited power. So as the hours pass, as the days move, as your absence becomes a pattern instead of an accident, the silence becomes louder. And then for the first time, he hears something he never expected, himself. His own mind, his own thoughts, his own fears, his own doubts. And facing yourself, that is one of the hardest confrontations a man can experience. Because in the silence, he begins to replay everything he dismissed, everything he overlooked, everything he took for granted. He remembers the messages he ignored because he thought he had time. He remembers the effort you made that he didn't match. He remembers the encouragement you gave him that he didn't reciprocate. And suddenly, he realizes how much of a blessing it was to have someone who genuinely cared, someone who initiated, someone who showed up, even in small ways. Silence turns those memories into lessons, and those lessons into accountability. That accountability doesn't feel good at first. It feels heavy. A man starts asking himself questions he never wanted to ask. Why did she stop reaching out? Did I push her away? Did I make her feel unimportant? What was I doing while she was trying? These questions don't appear all at once. They show up slowly, like drops of water hitting the same spot until the stone changes shape. Silence becomes the pressure he cannot escape, pressure that pushes him to acknowledge the truth he ignored. And the truth is simple, he got comfortable. He got comfortable believing your effort would always be there, comfortable believing you cared more, comfortable believing he didn't need to show up, comfortable believing your presence was guaranteed. But nothing in life is guaranteed, especially not someone's heart, someone's attention, someone's energy. Silence teaches him what comfort blinds him to that access to a person like you is a privilege, not a guarantee. And so the awakening begins. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. He starts noticing the absence where your messages used to be. He starts noticing how empty the conversations feel without your check-ins. He starts noticing how lonely the distractions are when your energy isn't part of his day. Silence reveals the emotional dependency he denied having, and it forces him to see something deeper. The difference between wanting attention and valuing connection. A man cannot grow without awareness. And awareness doesn't come from comfort. It comes from disruption. Your silence becomes that disruption. It becomes the shift that shakes him awake. It makes him examine himself, his behavior, his choices. It makes him notice the imbalance he once ignored. And once awareness enters a man's mind, it doesn't leave. It stays, it grows. It changes him. Because the first step in any transformation, emotional, personal, or relational, is self-recognition. And silence is the mirror he didn't ask for, but desperately needed. It shows him the man he was, and the man he has the potential to become if he's willing to grow, to step up, to appreciate, and to match the energy he once took for granted. This awakening is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not chaotic. It is quiet, internal, and deeply emotional. The kind of shift that only happens when a man is left alone with nothing but himself. And that is where true change always begins. When a man starts to feel the void, there comes a moment in every man's journey after the initial shock of silence settles, when something deeper begins to rise within him. A quiet, undeniable emptiness. This is the stage where he doesn't just notice your absence, he begins to feel it. And this feeling is not a surface-level discomfort. It is a growing void that slowly expands inside him, showing him the emotional space you once filled without him even realizing it. Because when you stop reaching out, you don't just remove a habit from his life. You remove a presence, a warmth, a rhythm, a source of emotional nourishment he never thought about until it disappeared. A man rarely understands what someone meant to him when that person is right there, giving, offering, showing up. He gets used to it. He adapts to your consistency. He becomes comfortable in the reliability of your care. He assumes your energy will always be available, that your words, your attention, your check-ins, your kindness, your softness will continue to show up even if he doesn't match them. But when silence enters, that comfort collapses. Suddenly, the messages that used to light up his screen are gone. The notifications he took for granted stop coming. The voice that once reassured him is no longer part of his day. And that absence becomes a vacuum that starts pulling at him emotionally, mentally, and psychologically. What's powerful about this stage is that the void doesn't hit him all at once. It creeps in gently. It starts with little moments. The times he instinctively checks his phone and finds nothing from you. The moments he scrolls back through old messages trying to relive the feeling you used to give him. The moments he remembers something funny or something stressful and realizes he can't share it with you anymore. The mind is a creature of habit, and you had become one of his habits, whether he admitted it or not. So when your presence disappears, the mind begins to search for what's missing. That search creates emotional friction. At first, he tries to distract himself. He turns to work, friends, noise, social media, anything to avoid acknowledging the emptiness settling in. But distractions can only hide the truth, not erase it. Because no matter where he turns, there's a moment when the world quiets down. That late night silence, that drive home alone, that pause between tasks, and the void sits there staring back at him. This void is not about dependency, it's about realization. It is the understanding that you weren't just someone in his contact list. You were someone who added meaning, comfort, stability, and emotional oxygen to his life. And as that realization grows, so does the depth of the void. He begins to understand that your presence was not small. It was not insignificant. It was not something easily replaced. It mattered, and it mattered more than he thought. A man often assumes that emotional presence is optional, something soft, something secondary. But when yours disappears, he becomes aware of the foundation it provided. He starts feeling the emotional drop. The difference between a life where someone cared and a life where no one does. That contrast is powerful, and it alters the way he views his own emotional needs. He begins to notice that he misses the peace your messages brought. He misses the reassurance your energy carried. He misses the comfort your presence offered. And most importantly, he misses the connection he thought he didn't need. The void also exposes something else, the truth about what he didn't give. Because as he feels that emptiness, he realizes it is the same emptiness you must have felt while showing up for someone who didn't show up for you. That awareness hits with force. It makes him see the imbalance he ignored. It makes him understand the weight you carried when you were trying to keep the connection alive. And that understanding creates emotional pressure, a pressure that begins shaping his conscience, softening his pride, and awakening his empathy. This stage is transformative because the void doesn't just make him miss you. It makes him see you, not as someone who reached out, but as someone whose presence mattered, someone who brought life joy, clarity, support, things he didn't appreciate fully. And now, in the silence, he feels the cost of that. This growing emptiness becomes a turning point. It marks the beginning of emotional awakening. It invites him to step into vulnerability. It forces him to acknowledge desire, attachment, connection, and need, all the things he once tried to dismiss. The void doesn't weaken him, it humbles him. And humility is where growth begins, because when a man starts to feel the void, that's when he begins to realize the truth. Your silence didn't just remove you from his life. It revealed the space you occupied in his heart. When ego starts to break down, there comes a point in a man's silence, born awakening, when something deeper than the void begins to shift his ego. And this moment is powerful, uncomfortable, and necessary, because ego is the greatest blocker of clarity, connection, and truth. It's the loudest voice in a man's head, the armor he wears to look strong even when he's not, the mask he hides behind so he doesn't have to feel what he actually feels. But when you stop reaching out, that ego, that shield, that false confidence he has been clinging to begins to weaken, bit by bit, day by day, thought by thought. At first, ego tries its hardest to fight back. It tells him, you don't care, she'll come back, she always does. Ego feeds him the same lines it's been feeding him for years, the same lies that kept him from growing, the same illusions that stopped him from showing up. Ego protects comfort, not truth. So the moment your silence enters, ego pushes back harder than ever, trying to keep him from feeling the discomfort your absence brings. It wants him to believe he's unaffected. It wants him to pretend your silence doesn't scratch at him. It wants him to stay numb. But something happens when silence continues. Pride gets tired. Arrogance starts losing its confidence. The part of him that once believed he didn't need you begins to lose its grounding, because ego is loud, but it's not strong, and silence is quiet, but it is powerful. Silence doesn't argue with ego, it exposes it. It shows him the truth that ego tried to hide. It reveals to him the difference between confidence and complacency. It forces him to acknowledge that he wanted your attention more than he admitted, that your presence mattered more than he allowed himself to express, that your absence unsettles him more than he ever expected. The battle between silence and ego is internal, invisible, and deeply emotional. He may not talk about it. He may not show it. He may not express what's happening inside him. Men are experts at hiding their emotional storms, but internally that storm is growing. Ego begins to shake because ego cannot survive introspection, and silence pushes him inward, into the parts of himself he tried to avoid, into the feelings he pretended didn't exist, into the truths he denied. And this is the part where frustration enters. Not frustration at you, but frustration at himself. That frustration sounds like, why am I thinking about her this much? Why is this bothering me? Why does it feel different this time? Why can't I brush this off? He wants to regain control of his emotions, but he can't. He wants to stay detached, but he's not. He wants to keep pretending, but pretending takes energy, and silence drains the energy right out of ego. The truth is, what's breaking inside him is not confidence. It's the facade. The facade that made him believe he didn't have to give, didn't have to show up, didn't have to communicate, didn't have to appreciate what he had. The facade that told him connection was optional and vulnerability was a weakness. Silence challenges all of that. It forces him to experience what happens when access to you is no longer guaranteed. And ego hates losing control. Ego hates being challenged. Ego hates being wrong. But silence keeps pressing quietly, steadily, undeniably. Then comes the emotional shift, the moment when ego begins to fall apart. He starts feeling things more deeply. He starts replaying conversations he once dismissed. He starts revisiting moments he should have handled better. He starts thinking about the little things you did that he didn't acknowledge. These reflections are not coming from his ego, they're coming from his heart. A part of him he usually keeps locked behind pride. And when pride loses power, vulnerability slips through the cracks. This vulnerability doesn't look soft or gentle. In men, vulnerability often shows up as restlessness, irritability, an unsettled feeling he can't explain. He might distract himself more. He might act busier. He might pull inward. But inside, the emotional breakdown of ego is taking place, and he can't stop it. Silence has already won the battle, not because it defeated him, but because it revealed him to himself. This is the stage where he starts questioning his behavior. He starts seeing where he failed. He starts realizing that the connection you offered was not something he earned, it was something you gave. And now that it's gone, he feels the weight of what he didn't protect. Ego breaking down is not the end of him, it's the beginning of him. It is the moment where self-awareness is born. It is the moment where accountability becomes possible. It is the moment where true emotional growth begins. Because a man who never confronts his ego can never choose love. A man who never breaks his pride can never appreciate a good woman. And a man who never loses comfort can never learn gratitude. Your silence didn't destroy him. It destroyed the part of him that kept him from becoming better. When realization hits and regret begins to grow, there is a moment in every man's emotional journey where silence stops being something he notices and becomes something he feels deeply. And it is in this moment that realization begins to sink in. Not the surface level realization of she hasn't texted. Not the prideful assumption that you're just busy. Not the casual thought that you'll come back eventually. No, this is a different kind of realization. This is the awakening of truth, the emotional punch that settles in when he finally understands that your silence is not an accident, it is a response to everything he didn't do, everything he didn't give, everything he overlooked. And that understanding is the birthplace of regret. Regret doesn't come loudly. It doesn't show up screaming. It doesn't arrive in panic or desperation. That comes later. Regret begins quietly, like a soft H he doesn't yet know how to describe. It starts with him remembering moments when he could have done better. Moments when you were trying. Moments when you reached out with sincerity, care, and consistency. He begins replaying all the times he brushed you off, all the times he responded short, all the times he took hours or days to reply while you showed up instantly. It's like his mind suddenly opens a folder labeled things you didn't appreciate, and silence becomes the highlighter that marks every page. This realization is powerful because it is honest. For the first time, he sees you not through the lens of convenience, but through the lens of value. He sees how patient you were, how forgiving you were, how much effort you poured into the connection, how many times you tried to communicate when he gave you minimal effort. And now the absence of your presence forces him to question why he didn't match your energy when he had the chance. That question hits him deeper than he ever expected. It shakes him because it exposes something he avoided admitting. He contributed to the silence he now can't escape. As the realization grows, so does the emotional weight of regret. He starts thinking about the last conversation you had. Did he sound uninterested? Was he cold? Was he distant? Did he answer with one-word replies? Did he treat your heart casually? These thoughts swirl in his mind, not because he's overthinking, but because the silence gives him nothing to distract himself with. When you were reaching out, he had an emotional safety net. He had the reassurance that no matter how poorly he showed up, you were there. But now that the net is gone, he feels the fall, and regret is the thud at the bottom. This stage is deeply uncomfortable for him because regret is tied to accountability. He realizes he should have listened more. He should have reciprocated more. He should have cared more openly. He should have shown more appreciation. He should have been present in ways he wasn't. And that regret grows quietly inside him like a seed he didn't plant but must now deal with. It becomes a reminder that effort is not something he can put off. Connection is not something he can take for granted. And people, especially good people, don't stay where they are not valued. What makes this stage even more powerful is that regret often comes with emotional clarity. He starts understanding who you were to him, not as an idea, but as an actual presence in his life. He sees your kindness not as something small, but as something rare. He sees your consistency not as something expected, but as something precious. He sees your communication not as something routine, but as something meaningful. And now that these things are gone, he feels their absence sharply, like a cold wind hitting a place that used to be warm. Regret also exposes the gap between who he was and who he should have been. It forces him to confront the parts of himself that chose comfort over growth, distance over vulnerability, ego over understanding. These realizations hurt, not because you hurt him, but because he finally sees how he hurt himself by not valuing what was real. It is in this quiet emotional breakdown that he starts to feel the true weight of the silence he once ignored. The regret doesn't just stay in his mind, it starts affecting his actions. He begins checking his phone more often. He reopens old conversations. He rereads your messages with new eyes. He starts wondering if you were sending subtle signals he missed. He feels the sting of knowing you were trying to build something he didn't fully contribute to. And now, in your silence, he finally understands the difference between someone who is simply there and someone who truly cares. This stage of realization and regret is not meant to destroy him. It is meant to wake him up. It is the stage where he begins to understand the cost of his inaction. It is the stage where he learns that love, effort, and connection must be nurtured, not ignored. And it is the stage where he begins to see you not as a message he expected, but as a blessing he should have protected. Because when a man reaches the point where regret begins to grow, he finally understands what his ego once blinded him to. Your silence wasn't rejection. It was the consequence of his choices. And now he feels every part of that truth.